Good evening, good evening. Good evening. Good evening. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. I already see some hand claps. Indeed, give yourself a round of applause for being here. If you are here, then you know that the Academic Development Open Virtual Hub, that is ADOV at UNISA, in partnership with the DIAS, is hosting the Global Voices Climate Action Summit from the 22 to the 25 September, centered on the theme Green Technology, Innovation, and AI for Climate Resilience. The summit will bring together young leaders to stimulate international forums, building on the success of their Model UN MOOC with over 3,200 participants. Wow. The event will foster skills in critical thinking, collaboration, and problem solving while exploring how innovation and technology can drive sustainable climate action. Welcome once again. Welcome once again. So I am Tendo Rabuzuro. I will be your program director for today. If you can see me, I've just switched on my camera so that you can see that I'm not a robot. Indeed, I am a real human being. So what you do see on the screen there, David has flighted on the screen our program for today. So I'm just going to amend the program just a little bit for the welcoming remarks and the context setting. That is where I will ask David, Mr. Hubstad, to go ahead and take those items as well. So please feel free, be welcome, enjoy this evening. I will also be a bit time driven as well. So if you hear me unmuting my mic while you're speaking, please don't take offense. I'm just making sure that we have a smooth sailing trip. So without any other waste of time, Mr. Hubstad, David, please over to you. So if you could take us through the welcome remarks, context setting, STU 501 Model United Nations. David, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Tendo. I hope you guys are well. Yes, thank you. And one small welcome to everyone, students, guests, esteemed presenters that we've managed to get to come and speak to us today. Today's theme is really about green technology, innovation, and AI for climate resilience. Now, I know just like AI is the buzzword around the world, well, so is climate change. I just want to actually use the chat for a minute. And I want the audience to tell us, do you believe that climate change is real? Or is it something that's just made up? So just say yes or no if you think climate change is actually real. And let's quickly have a look at the chat to see what everyone is going to say. Well, it depends where in the world you've been living for the last maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years. Have you noticed that things have definitely started warming up, changing? And I see a lot of yeses coming through on the chat. So I think we all are feeling it, that definitely something is changing with our climate. It's definitely getting hotter. I mean, for example, here in Polokwane, we didn't even have spring. It went straight from winter to summer. It was just very hot. I was going to say flipping hot, but yeah, flipping hot indeed. So, guys, welcome. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys coming in. At least we had someone say no. That's okay. Be brave. You can disagree. It's part of the debate. So welcome, guys. We're really looking forward to these sessions. We are aware exams are just around the corner, so we do expect that we don't want to keep these sessions very long for you guys. So this is really going to be our summer, shall we say, global voices, climate change. And so it's really our summer session because we already had one early in the year. So luckily for those guys that managed to join us. All right. So the context for this evening, I just really want to touch on a few things. We've got our lovely presenters lined up. I just want to quickly jump to the next presentation. Give me 2 seconds. All right, so our context is actually very important. Why are we doing this? Because actually we do need to start looking after our planet. And I think it's long overdue that we can all agree we have definitely not been looking after the planet Earth. And we only have one planet that we actually can live on, guys. The moon and Mars and all these other funny things that you hear out there, it's not really viable at this point for the human race. So we got to look after what God has given us. So it's really, really important that we do look after it. So as Tendo did say, the program is a little bit tweaked. Unfortunately, Prof. Magano, which is the executive director for DTSFL, and Dr. Denzel Chetty, they are on urgent business with another conference that's coming up. So we kind of had to release them for this evening, but we'll try and get them back on Thursday evening when we have our closing ceremony. And you see that we do have presenters who are in the field, who are young people, who are making a difference in the areas they are in. Then we are definitely going to also look at the student voices. So if you have not attended such a workshop with Adolf before, you will be surprised to see that we actually do invite students to come and present. For example, how did they do in the Model United Nations MOOC co-curricular activity? To really get feedback from the actual students who participated in the MOOC this year. So we'll definitely be having 2 voices that were randomly selected from all the students who managed to complete. And we've got some exciting news about Thursday, because we have selected 5 of those students who are going to receive gifts on Thursday. So the 2 of them, you guys already know you're getting your gifts, but there's still 3 more students that will be invited on Thursday who do not know yet that they actually have won a gift. And that's what we promised them during the course, that we are going to give gifts as well. Then, of course, we're going to have the DS. Now, if you've never heard of the DS, this is our partner company all the way from India. So one of our BRICS companies or partners. And they have been running the Model UN since last year. And these guys are young people, but they are doing major, major work in their field and all over the world as well. They have got hands-on experience. They've been in and out and everywhere with regards to Model UN. So you're going to actually meet the team under Mr. Kashyap Gupta. So yes, so definitely stay tuned for that as well. Very interesting. And of course, the students who have been with us all the time would know that the training, the lessons that he's been presenting in August this year. Sorry, yes, that one, it went really, really well. And we had quite a lot of fun, a lot of good debates as well. Now, here's an interesting question for you guys, right? So because we're in the academic field, we really want to understand a few things. So in the area that you're living, think about this for 2 seconds. How can we integrate artificial intelligence, right? We see artificial intelligence doing amazing things all over the show in every sphere that we can imagine, right? How can AI, with green technologies, enhance climate prediction and disaster risk management, and particularly in vulnerable areas? Now, in our country, we really know there's one specific province that seems to be getting hammered every time it's rain season. Now, do you guys think it's possible that AI with green technologies can really make a difference to those people there? Think for yourself where you're staying. Maybe use the chat, post it there. We'd love to hear what you guys are saying. Can you think, how can it make a difference? So really go think about it. If we could instantly develop a system that can we implement today in the area that you're living, how can we actually make a difference? So as we go through this, the training today, or the webinar today, please do post in your chats in there. You just never know. I might surprise you, and we might be giving a gift to the person with the most thoughtful answer, and we'll announce that next week, Thursday. So they have actually just thrown in a curveball for next week, Thursday. We'll have someone who's posted an answer, and not an AI answer, please. We want it from you, the human being, not the AI agent. To really actually see what you guys are thinking. So if there's something you could do, I will post the question in the chat. So we'll give you some time, and yes, and then we'll see what we do. Now, guys, if you did have the opportunity to work through the STU 501 Model United Nations MOOC, it really is a course that we've developed since last year to take you through the entire process of how the Model UN works, who the role players are, and why is it so important that we have a voice as the Global South in terms of what gets decided there and who's making those decisions. So it's really, really critical element of learning. And we've seen the students that have enjoyed the lessons really did come out and ask lots of questions from Kashyap, and to really push the boundaries of what they're learning at university, but also what's happening in the world. So it was really, really interesting. So some of the objectives that we do cover in the course is really to understand, how does the United Nations system work? Who are the role players? Where do they come from? And how do they influence our policies within our own country? The practical skills, that's also the great thing with this course is we've got delegates. So if you do see some of your attendees having flags instead of a profile pic and you're asking why, because these are the delegates that are tomorrow are going to be in their simulation and they are going to be running through basically everything they've learned, but to come up with a resolution for climate change using AI and green technology. So it's going to be a very interesting debate. And of course, fortunately, it's a closed session, so it's only for those delegates who have been with the training, who have signed up, who understand what's required of them, the speeches, and the voting, and how's it all going to work that'll be taking place. However, these guys will be giving us feedback on Thursday evening. So we are going to have the two different committees, which is the AU and ECOSOC, and they are going to be presenting to us what did they come up with in their resolution. So stay tuned. As I said, it's very much a practical module that we've implemented. Now, to really get those critical analysis skills working, this is why the course is also there, because we really want to look at things like peace and security. It's a big thing in this world. You see what's happening in Israel and Ukraine, for example. Just crazy things that are happening in this world. And you wonder, how does these things actually happen? Why is nobody stopping it? Those are the type of questions we really need to be answering. So it's really, really important that we can actually delve into these type of issues and actually have a good voice in the global sense as well. Of course, we've got teamwork, we've got leadership, we've also got research. So these delegates have been doing some research on the countries that were allocated to them so that they can actually go back and sort of debate and negotiate and come up with a resolution with the sub-theme of climate change and green technologies. So we really are looking forward to tomorrow's engagement simulation, but do join us again for those that are not part of it, because on Thursday we are going to have feedback from the two committees and actually do see what they got up to during the sessions. And of course, there are facilitations and awards that will also be issued from the DS, because they are going to be pretty much running the session, but also observing how did the delegates perform. So it's really, really fun stuff as well. Now, we're going to have two students who are going to be speaking to us a little bit later in the session. So they've already joined us, and I see they're already online, so that's great. So as I said, with Adolf, we do want to bring in the students to really tell other students, hey, this is something really worthwhile. It is a co-curricular activity, which really means at the end of the semester, if you complete the MOOC, you will be giving recognition, a report card indicating this is what you've actually completed this year. And there's quite a number of other courses that you can actually engage in. If you're asking yourself, David, where do I find this stuff? All right, let me quickly show you. I just want to quickly end this one, and then I'm going to quickly jump to the Adolf platform. So please take note, it might have been a little bit slow today. We are busy with quite a number of enhancements for the platform itself. I will post this in the chat as well. So you just go to adolf.unisa.ac.za, and then you will see the module United Nations is right on top. So it's the first course that you can actually see. But do scroll down. My exams, if you've never done an online exam in MyUnisa, there's a course you definitely should do. And there's AI course, there's mobile learning, there's HerTech, and there's a whole bunch of other courses that you can engage in. There is a guide in terms of how to log in, so you guys can just quickly click on that. It's your first time. It is open, which means it's open to anybody, guys. So it's not just for UNISA students, it is open for everyone to actually go and access these courses. They are an open platform, and that's really what Adolf is all about. Okay, so we're DA funded, and our materials that we create is open for anybody. All right, so I really hope you guys have enjoyed the first part of the series or the session. I'm going to hand over now back to Tendo, the program director, to invite the next speaker on board. Thanks, Tendo.
Thank you so much, David. Let's go ahead and give David a round of applause for his presentation. Thank you so much. So next on our item, we are going to the item that speaks about consideration of the just transition towards a low carbon economy and resilient society. This item will be taken over by Ms. Sitedi. Just as you can see on the screen, Ms. Sitedi's bio is written there. She is the Manager for Climate Mitigation at the Presidential Climate Commission. With over a decade of experience in climate policy and regulation across government levels, she has worked extensively in sectors such as energy, mining, transport, and land development. At the PCC, she leads efforts to build consensus among social partners and shape evidence-based recommendation for South Africa's just transition to a low-carbon economy. She holds a master's in aquatic ecology from the University of Johannesburg and a Battery MBA from Battery Associates in Ireland. Let us give a warm round of applause for Ms. Bridget Sithedi. Ma'am, when you are ready, please go ahead and unmute your mic and take the floor. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think it is still the afternoon. My name, as previously mentioned, is Bridget Sithedi. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear.
Thank you. I'm just going to go straight and share my presentation. I'm going to put this on slide mode. Just waiting for it to go on slide mode. There we go. So yes, as previously, as introduced by Tendo, I'm Bridget Sithedi working with the PCC. And I'm just going to give a very brief overview of who we are. As David had mentioned, you know, we only have one world, right? And because of the economic activities that have been taking place, especially that is quite fossil fuel heavy, we have pumped in a lot of pollutions in the air, and the reason why we do have this challenge of climate change. So now we have to transition. So there is a conversation that we need to have. It's a very difficult conversation, but one that says, if we're going to transition, what does the transition look like? And who is it going to benefit? And with a country like South Africa, making sure that we do not repeat the injustices of the past. So in 2018, at the Job Summit, Labour approached the president and said, look, we are in this transition, we cannot avoid it, but we need to have a body that really guides the transition and makes sure that the most vulnerable and the most impacted by climate change are not left behind and are not left worse off than they previously were. And that is how the president then set up the PCC in 2020. Now we are made up of, so the PCC, because it has to be a body that really allows the voices of everyone. We have 6 constituencies that are represented through commissioners, and that is civil society, faith, youth, local government, labor, and business. And if you noticed, civil society, faith, and youth are all part of civil society. But what we did is that we recognized that, especially with climate impacts, faith communities are normally on the forefront, them and local government. So we had to give faith an independent voice to say, look, we're not going to just group you with civil society, because when we have a climate disaster like a flood, you are normally the first ones to take people in. And what we also did is that we were very intentional about having youth also as a standalone voice to say the youth matter. You know, they're the ones who are going to be living in the future that we're transitioning into, and therefore we had youth as a standalone constituency within the PCC. And all these constituencies, we have commissioners leading the work of the PCC. I'm part of the secretariat. I'm full-time employed by the PCC, and we regard ourselves as the food soldiers of the PCC, where we carry out the work program of the organization. And with the enacting of the climate change bill, this happened last year, I think around August, we are now a statutory body. We function very similar to the public protector. We are an independent body we are government, but more working independently. And as mentioned, led by our commissioners. We have the president as the head of the commission, and we have Dr. Crispian Oliver, who is the deputy chairperson. Now, what is it that we do? Because we need to make sure that as we advise the president, as we advise society of what the transition is to look like, we need to ensure that the work that we do is really led through science. And you know, when you say science, is not just academic knowledge, it's also lived experiences of the people who are actually experiencing the climate impacts. And we do have research and information that is, so to ensure that our work is science-based and is credible, we build consensus. So we don't just take one body of work and give it to the different constituencies and say, this is what we came up with. As I had mentioned, we have different commissioners where we forge consensus between the different constituencies, and we have a convening power to bring all the constituencies, sit in one room, and to really just figure out what the transition is going to look like. And one thing which I did not mention, the PCC is an advisory body. So we do not do the implementation. We work very closely with government. We work very closely with business to say these are the recommendations that the PCC has come up with. One example of those will be the electricity recommendations, where one of the biggest outcome is the getting renewable energy into the grid. What the PCC had suggested was around, or recommended, that's actually the right word to use, was 6 to 8 gigawatts of renewables onto the grid every year. And I know that the SAREM, the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, suggested about, I think it was between 3 to 6, which is not too different from what the PCC recommendations put out. So we commission research, we build consensus, and then we give our recommendations to the right body, whether it's transport or whether it's electricity, and we also work the journey with them in the implementation phase. But we, as an advisory body, do not implement. We're not an implementary body. So what do we stand on? And basically the foundation of the PCC is to ensure that the transition is as equitable and just as possible. And that is why we have the just transition as our overarching focus. So basically the just transition is the foundation of the PCC. We want to ensure that the work that we do is procedurally just. So we have what we call the 3 transitional elements of the PCC, which is procedural justice, which as I mentioned, we call together our constituencies. We normally have, when it comes to big recommendations like the one we had with the electricity recommendation, and recently we had a national colloquium on the national determined contributions, which the country, when I say the country, I mean the Department of Forest, Fishery and the Environment, will be handing over to the UN at COP30. We called together all the constituencies. We made sure it was a hybrid event. We made sure that those who don't have data and cannot travel do have data. Those who are close enough but do not have means of getting to our venue, we did provide means. We did have a budget constraint, but basically to make sure that whatever decision that we make, it is procedurally just. We made sure that the people on the ground, the people in the affected sectors, are given a seat at the table to actually influence as well the decisions that are being made. We also believe in distributive justice, meaning that whatever outcomes of the transition should be equitably distributed. I mean, one of the studies show that with the transition, we will have a net positive job gain, but you want to make sure that those who are negatively impacted are not just left behind, or that the net gain is actually equitably distributed between affected parties, and that it is restorative, meaning that we do address the injustices of the past. And as I had mentioned, our core principles and our foundational focus is basically the just transition, and the PCC came up with a framework of a just transition. I think it was released 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I'm just not sure exactly when, but it is a document that is we have put in order to lead the transition, and basically to make sure that we lift our people out of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. It is due for review. One of the big things that as we've been working with our different constituencies and people on the ground, we realized that things like gender has not really had a big focus in the transition. We realized that when we did our NDCs recently, and we had a gender working group meeting, and so many things came out of that we just realized that as we update the transition framework, that things like that needs to be brought more to light and be given more attention. So as I mentioned, that we do commission research within the commission. One of the big research topic is on energy, because it is, I will show a slide later, it is the biggest contributor to emissions in the country, because our electricity sector is quite fuel dependent. And basically, just what does our long-term energy mix look like? And we want one that is predominantly on renewables, right? There where we have storage. We do know that renewables are variant. So when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, you want to make sure that you've got storage, and you also want to make sure that you've got peaking support for those high usage periods within the day. And we also want to make sure that we have an available grid. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the transition. Right now, Eskom is being divided into the 3 different bodies, and one of them is the transmission. It's called the NTCSA, National Transmission Company South Africa, where they are then responsible for building the grid from the Cape provinces, where our renewable energy resources are. I mean, we do have renewable resources all across the country, but that is where we have some of the best in the world. But now our grid is sitting in the north, in Mpumalanga, because that's where the coal is sitting now. And then our base center is in Gauteng. So now you need to move the energy from the Cape provinces, you need to move it up. And that's when we need to then build the transmission lines from the Cape provinces up to where the base load is, which is in Gauteng. But then what then happens now is that you do have constraints in terms of the current grid in pulling the different in pulling the renewable energy on the system. So grid upgrade, it's very key in this transition. And one of the best ways, or one of the consideration, because it's such a big and such an expensive project, some of the funding from the JET investment plan, the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, has been dedicated towards that project, and I will show the numbers a bit later on. We also need to make sure that, like I mentioned, that as we plan our future electricity mix, it's also aligned with the JET investment plan, getting as many renewables on the grid as possible. It says improve EAF as much as possible. So EAF is the electricity available factor, and one of the main reasons why we had such bad load shedding is because the electricity load factor has dropped at the power station, and this has now been fixed. As you all know, that we don't have load shedding as much, or we don't have it anymore. And yeah, so it has been improved. It can get better, but I think it's now at a point where our power stations are quite stable. And that energy efficiency is a very important one, because you want to make sure that the power that you get into your house, for example, you want to use it as, you want to be as conservative and as sustainable as possible. And this is where energy efficiency comes in. And as mentioned, we also as a country want to make sure that we get the new energy from renewables into the grid as much as possible. And some of the work that we do on energy and just on the just transition is socially renewable, socially owned models in energy transition. I think as a country, we've come a long way in making sure that the country is electrified, but we do have those regions that are not electrified yet. And the biggest reason for that is they are just too far to be connected to the grid. I mean, to build transmission lines to a community of about 200 people just in a way doesn't financially make sense, and that's why we have not reached full electrification for the country. But it does not, it is still in terms of the constitution, every South African deserves the right to have access to electricity, and we also want to make sure that it is clean electricity that they have access to. And we also know that this community also do not use the best methods for cooking, and we also are pushing for clean cooking technologies for these communities as well. And one of the big suggestions that have been put into place for this community is to have mini grids where communities will have access to kind of like their own substation, but with renewable energy, where the electricity is produced locally and can be fed directly into those communities to be used by them, and also to further develop the community, because you know that once you electrify a community, then you really increase their potential of really developing themselves. So just really looking at different models of how this is going to work. Is it just going to be renewable energy? Are you going to also include gas when it comes to cooking? So these are just different models that the PCC is looking at. I had mentioned earlier that electricity, which is power generation, contributes the most to our emissions in the country. And if you can see on the graph, between 2030 and 2040, this is where we are expected to have the most reduction of emissions, and this is basically the year of the decade of action. And one of the main drivers for this is, I had previously mentioned that we need to develop our grid from the Cape provinces up to where the load center is, which is Gauteng. And you know, it is projected that by 2032 we will have this build of the grid, and where we can feed in a lot of renewable energies into the system. And this is where you see that you have a lot of you have then a bigger reduction in emissions from the electricity sector. You also have energy industries, and this is mostly industries like your Sasol and your Celometals, and this industry are the hard to abate sectors, meaning that they're not easy to electrify, or fossil fuel are their feedstock, and you need and I think this is very fitting to this discussion. This is where you really need innovation, and one of the big conversation is on green steel and the use of green hydrogen to try to decarbonize some of these hard to abate sectors. We also have transport as one of the main contributors to emissions, and this is where we are really starting to have a conversation on electric vehicles. You can have a conversation of green hydrogen powered vehicles, but when you produce electricity and then from electricity you produce green hydrogen, you lose about 30% of that energy. So the general feel is the general discussion is that if a sector can be electrified, you use electricity, and for those hard to abate sectors, then you go for hydrogen. And that is why when we speak of transition in the transport sector, then we speak of electric vehicles, and that's why we don't really consider green hydrogen. And we've got other sectors like agriculture that are a bit harder to decarbonize. But one conversation is just on dietary changes and just behavioral changes to get the emissions low. And as previously mentioned, we really want to ensure that our work is science-based and that is credible. And these are also some of the requirements when you submit the NDC. And as mentioned, this is a year where we will be submitting our NDCs. We want to make sure that the NDC that we submit is locally credible in terms of what are the local circumstances, internationally credible, and also scientifically credible. And that your previous NDC, your current NDC submission, right now we will be submitting the 2035 NDCs. So your current submission should be more ambitious than the previous submission. And it has to take all these other considerations into account. So when speaking of a just transition for the country, what does it mean and what are our local challenges? One challenge is that we've got a timing issue. I had mentioned green hydrogen. Right now, gray hydrogen is cheaper than green hydrogen, and the technology is not as mature. So the technologies of the future, the technologies that you need to transition are not really ready to be used now. And then you've got a timing challenge when it comes to technologies. But I do know that with political will and R&D and scaling, and I know that there is a lot of political will in South Africa when it comes to green hydrogen, then you can bring the prices down. We see this with electric vehicles. It was only a few rich people back in the day who drove electric cars, but now we see that more and more people will be able to afford the cleaner technologies. We've got a location problem. When you look at some of the green hydrogen projects they're planned for in the Cape provinces, but also when you look at the renewable energy resources there in the Cape provinces, while you have the current job sitting in Mpumalanga. So it's not like if I resign tomorrow from Grill or from Delmas, it'll be easy for me to just get a job close by. We've got a location problems. And then you also have a skills challenge, meaning that the jobs of the future, and I'm really glad that this is an academic space, the jobs of the future need new skills, and that's where skills development is really critical to the discussion. So you also have, and I see I'm left with very few minutes. I'm just going to speed over this section, but I did mention
4 minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you. So I did mention that we have a just energy transition investment plan. This is really this funds coming from the International Partners Group. America did pull out from this. I think we all know the political situation that's happening there, but we did have also Netherlands and Denmark joining, and the fund has increased to $12.8 billion. And these are just the numbers of where the investment have gone in. We've got the electricity sector, as mentioned, the build of the transition is going to be quite investment heavy, and that's a majority of the funds went there. And also because that's the biggest polluting sector, we've got transport, we've got green hydrogen, we've got skills development, we've got municipal capacity. Municipalities play such a critical role in the transition, and that is why they have also been allocated funds in the JET IP. And this diagram, Teskey scheme, is really just to show that the majority of the funds that are being used in the transition are from local source. I think if you look at, it says it's from the private sector, but you do have some of it in government, and most of the government funding is going towards adaptation, which also highlights the challenges of adaptation funding in the country. But it's also quite encouraging to know that about 120 billion is from local sources, of 12 billion is from international sources. So really just to encourage the young people on the call to say, there is funding within the country. We don't have to wait for a country overseas for us to work on our own transition. We do have funding from different sources, and it's a transition that could be country-led. Just a final slide from my side. What does a a just transition look like? We want to make sure that our labor force is skilled, and that, as I mentioned, that we've got that jobs challenge, that they are ready for the jobs of the future and the technology of the future. We want to make sure that we've got economic diversification, and that we also support small and local businesses. We also want to make sure that we've got social support. We are very cognizant of the fact that not everyone will be able to transition, and when we have that problem, you want to make sure that at least the municipalities are functioning properly. You've got proper functioning hospitals, running water, sanitation, just so that in the transition, people are still having a dignified way of life. And governance is very important. I mean, the transition is going to require an all of governance and all of society approach, and governance in how this transition is going to work out is very important. And as I mentioned the numbers, climate finance is very critical to the discussion. You cannot have a transition that is not financed, and it's going to be an expensive transition. So we really need to have that conversation as well. So these are basically the building blocks of what a transition looks like and what it is going to require. So that is it from my side. I am going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Teddy. A round of applause, a round of applause. Thank you for the presentation. Mr. Teddy, in the interest of time, there were a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe if you could engage some of the questions in the chat. I did see some hands were raised. What I do want to do is, if we have time towards the end for both of our speakers to be able to answer verbal questions, then that way I don't steal inside your time. Also, you might notice that David shared a link in the chat. I have a look at that link. It's a link that speaks on the competition. I'm just sharing a screen. Once you click that link, it will lead you here where you can just click on that competition and fill in the details. So when you have time while listening to some of the presentations, go ahead and click on that link. Without any further ado, I am going to move over to our second speaker, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ms. Mafantiri, who will be speaking on the G20, an opportunity for youth-led climate action. So Ms. Mafantiri is an environmental scientist and junior researcher in climate finance at the Institute for Economic Justice. Her work focuses on climate diplomacy, the just transition, and gender justice. She holds an honors degree in geography and environmental management from the University of Free State and is a trained climate policy negotiator accredited by the Harvard Kennedy School and UNFCCC. She has previously worked as a development consultant in Lesotho and as a research and policy officer at Climate Action Network South Africa. She has also contributed to youth advocacy through an African Union Youth Reference Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Ms. Mafantiri. Ma'am, please unmute your mic and go ahead and share your screen when you are ready. Ms. Mafantiri, when you are ready, ma'am, you can go ahead. Yes, I do see your mic is unmuted. Could you say something, ma'am? Ms. Mafantiri, are you there, ma'am?
Tendo, I think Ms. Mafantiri might need to exit and then rejoin the Teams meeting. It might be one of those gremlins.
Okay.
Molehi, if
Ms.
you can hear
Mafantiri?
us, please do that, and I'll promote you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. As we're waiting for her to join back in, at one point I noticed we had 256 attendees in our summit this evening. This is great and exciting. And maybe as we're still waiting for Ms. Mafantiri, Mr. Teddy, may I go ahead and pose one question that I saw in the chat to you, ma'am? It reads as follows. Our economy is currently not growing at a rate that is required to create enough job opportunities. Are we ready as a country to move away from our coal and lean more towards renewable energy resources without negatively impacting our very weak economy? What do you have to say about that, ma'am?
Thank you, Tendo. I'll just come in and answer that. So the president has made it very clear that the country will transition at a pace that we can afford. So basically, even if we can build the transmission lines tomorrow, we will not switch off the power stations. We have about 80,000 people that work in mining, in the coal mining, to support the energy, the electricity generation. So you have the mine workers in the coal fields in Mpumalanga, about 80,000 of them, and then you've got the actual power station workers. And it's not just the two industries. You've got the service providers. You've got the local communities that depend on these two industries that you need to consider. So, and that is really what the just transition is all about. People should not be left behind. As you transition the more highly skilled people, those ones will be easier to move. Then you've got the semi-skilled people who you will have to then upskill, right? And then you've got those that will probably need the social support. But really speaking on economy, and that is why we really speak on economic diversification. We had a webinar last week at the PCC where one of the speakers really mentioned that to have economic diversification, you need electricity. And that is how during the apartheid time, South Africa was really able to industrialize. That's when they built the Sasol, and that's when they built the ArcelorMittals. But energy is currently quite expensive, and Eskom now has the whole population to give energy to. So it's not like back in the day where energy was cheap, but it was only available to very few people. And that is also one of the big benefits of the transition, because renewable energy, very close to an off-taker, then becomes cheap electricity for economic diversification. So as when we speak about the transition, you have to have a conversation about economic diversification and skills development to make sure that as one industry kind of transitions out and another industry gets built, you are taking the people along with you, and you're taking the economy along with you. And available, safe, I mean, not necessarily safe, but what's the word I'm looking for? And electricity that is sustainable in terms of availability and that is affordable are some of the key levers to economic diversification that we have seen in the previous past. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tsedi. Thank you so much for that response. Let us go ahead and try Ms. Mafantiri. Can you try and unmute your mic again, Ms. Mafantiri? Oh no, I do see that your mic is unmuted, Ms. Mafantiri, but I don't think we are able to hear you from our side. David, if you can confirm, is it just me? Can you hear on your side?
No. Unfortunately, on my side as well, I can see that she did manage to post in the chat and her mic is open, but for some odd reason, we're not getting connection with her.
Oh man. Okay, maybe we can try again, Ms. Mafantiri, just to go in and out. But with the interest of time, let me jump over to the next agenda item. And when this agenda item is done, we can come back to you, Ms. Mafantiri. The next agenda item is titled Student Voices, and this will be an item taken by David. David, over to you.
All right, thanks, Tendo. Okay, so as I said earlier in the introduction, we do have 2 students who have completed the Model UN MOOC, and I contacted them this morning to say that they were selected by AI. So don't worry, we didn't give out your names or anything. It simply just generated a number, and the number was based on your profile. So that's how we got to selecting you. So don't worry, we didn't upload your personal details whatsoever. We're very conscious about that. All right, so the first one up is going to be Miss A. Kunene, and then once she's done, Miss D. Kotza is then going to follow her. So over to you, Miss Kunene. You can switch on your mic and your camera. You can go for it, Angel. It's your chance now.
Hello, can anybody see me?
Yes, we can, but I think you've got 2 devices on over there. It's echoing.
Okay, no problem. I'll just remove one. Am I visible? I don't think I'm possibly visible properly. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Angel Kunene, and I am from Johannesburg, Gauteng. I am a student at UNISA, doing my first year enrolled for international relations. So I major in politics, and what I would say is my experience. I'm here to talk about my experience with this course, the Model UN MOOC, and thank you for having me before I proceed. I can say that my experience with this, how did I find this course? I found it very fun. I found it very fun and very enjoyable, because in partaking in this MOOC, I was allowed to experience and learn more about international law, diplomacy, public speaking, because I'm not used to public speaking. So this has actually provided me an option, not even an option, an opportunity to actually start public speaking without being afraid. So I'd like to say this has been a very great opportunity for me and other students to experience and explore this opportunity, because now we get to learn about how UN works through the Module UN simulation, and with the importance of focusing on the sustainable development goals, which in this aspect is the climate action goal, which is the goal number 13. I am very happy to be part of this, because I get to align everything with what's happening with the MOOC and the course that I'm studying, so that I can actually work towards utilizing the skills for tomorrow and actually helping out with whichever industry that requires anything that requires innovation, climate change, whether education or fair education or health, whichever that needs my expertise. So what I found interesting that I learned from this course is that awareness is not just enough. It's not enough. We need to take action where we can take action from because yes, we can raise awareness, but without action, there wouldn't be a change in the world. So I would like to say thank you for having me in this sorry. Thank you for having me today, and I'm happy to be to be present to present to you guys about what my experience is, because without this MOOC, I wouldn't understand also the procedures of the Model UN and Model UN and the United Nations and other organizations, and what contributions they bring to this world and how they help out in humanitarian things. So thank you.
Right, thanks, Angel. Much appreciated. And now we're going to hand over to Ms. D. Kotze for your feedback.
Okay, let me just pull. I did prepare something because anxiety is a thing. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Dominique Kotze, and I'm currently living in Bloemfontein, Free State. I am a fourth-year student at UNISA, currently studying law. I found the Model UN course to be very interactive and user-friendly. The information was clear and tasks were set up in a way to build on each other, preparing us for our final speech at the Model UN simulation tomorrow night. The course was not difficult in the sense that once I sat down and got to it, I found myself sailing through it with ease. From learning about keywords that are used in the Model UN to watching videos of heroes like Nelson Mandela speaking, I was reminded about how important modules like this are. In our world's current climate, diplomacy and being able to get your point across in a way that people want to listen to is of the utmost importance. This Model UN course laid a brilliant foundation for doing just that. As always, having a dream to potentially work for the United Nations one day, I always thought it was impossible. The Model UN module showed me that there are many different facets to the United Nations, and maybe that dream isn't as crazy as what I thought it was. A part of the program I really enjoyed learning about was the types of caucuses and the differences between the moderated and unmoderated caucuses. The fact that it's such a fun word to say was a bonus. Initially, it was really intimidating to imagine myself being involved in a situation that I couldn't prepare for. But upon completing the course, I realized that through the coursework and lessons provided to us by Keshav and David, I was prepared. This module taught me that diplomacy isn't just about speaking. It's about listening, adapting, and collaborating. It has transformed my understanding of leadership and teamwork and made me appreciate the complexity of global decision-making. In conclusion, Model UN has greatly enriched my life, and it saddens me that I only got involved with it in my final year. Lastly, I would like to give a big thank you to David, Keshav, the facilitators, and UNISA team for getting us through the lessons and teaching us everything we need to know. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Kotze. Much appreciated. So there we go, guys. There's a reason why you want to do this Model UN. So next year, when the course starts again, and you haven't done it before, have a chance. Come and join us. Enjoy the lessons that we have. So I'm going to hand back now to Tendo. I think our speaker is ready, so hopefully she'll be able to join us now. Back to you, Tendo.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Let's go ahead and try Ms. Mafantiri. Are you with us, ma'am?
Then I'm just quickly checking if she's maybe fallen under the attendees list. Just quickly having a check over there.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
If you could raise your hand, that would be also great. Because we've got so many people online, it's quite tricky to actually find them. There we go. Fantastic. Give me 2 seconds. Keep your hand raised. We're going to promote you shortly. So give me 2 seconds. And there we go.
Ms. Mafantiri.
Okay.
Awesome. But we're getting a feedback. We did hear the okay from your side.
Tendo, she's using 2 devices, so she's just going to switch the sound off on the speakers off on a laptop, and then she'll use the other device to speak through. So just remember that, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Mafantiri?
Thank you. Yes. Am I sharing the screen?
Yes, ma'am, and you loud and clear. Thank you so much. Go ahead, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for bearing with the slight delays. I'm going to try and rush because I understand that we are running behind schedule. So my presentation was going to be on the G20, an opportunity for youth. My name is Mudie Mafandire, and I'm a junior researcher at the Institute for Economic Justice. So in the chat previously, I shared this link to this website, right? The Institute for Economic Justice is an official resource partner of the G20 presidency. What does that mean? That means that we assist the G20 presidency with their policy work behind the scenes in the negotiations process. So I'm going to open up this document, and I actually want to walk you all through it, right, before I get to the youth part of it all. Because from what I've understood from various stakeholder engagements is that from a regular person's perspective, it's a bit confusing as to what the G20 is. People are seeing signs at the airport, they're seeing billboards around town, and they don't exactly understand why, when apparently the G20 summit is only happening in November. So I want to explain to you how the G20 is not just a summit happening in November, it's in fact a process because it's an economic forum, right? So this is a process which has been going on since last year in November when Brazil handed over the presidency to South Africa. Okay, all right. So going through the website, and I hope that you've all managed to click the link as well. I'll be doing the same just because of presentation issues. So here we go. So we have the G20 in South Africa. So who exactly are the G20? The G20 is short for Group of 20. That is 20 of the world's most developed economies from both developing and developed countries. And as of recent times, it also includes the African Union. This is a major win and in fact was championed by South African delegates of the Y20. That is the Youth 20. That's one of the engagement groups of the Group of 20. So aside from the official processes that are going on under the G20 on a multilateral level, and this is closed off, right? Because this is simply between government to government. You have engagement groups as well. And that's where, as youth or as a regular citizen, you can participate because those are open processes. So the Group of 20 accounts for 85% of the global GDP, 75% of global trade, 60% of land area, and 63% of the population of the world. So it's not just a small meeting, so to speak, and it's not a small economic forum, although there are very many of them. You know, this is a significant moment for South Africa. South Africa's G20 theme is solidarity, sustainability, and equality. This is a very progressive theme for G20 presidency, and I'm pretty sure that's very intentional because, as you might know, next year the G20 is going to be held in, or rather the presidency will be handed over to the United States of America, where we are not sure what sort of limitations there may be around even themes, topics, or lines of negotiations. So South Africa is really trying to shoot for the stars here with this particular theme and the different ways in which the engagement groups have been trying to get progressive negotiations across the line. Okay, so I've mentioned to you that next year's presidency goes to the United States of America. Last year's presidency is Brazil. So this is called a troika, right? So this is how you maintain consistency and also ensure that your policy inputs are making it across the line. So that's to say that South Africa is working with both Brazil. So it worked with Brazil last year. Right now is working with Brazil and the United States. And next year, the United States will be working with South Africa. So this is to ensure that whatever policy recommendations come out of the Leaders Summit or come out of engagement groups are able to be implemented. So right now, if we were to just say South Africa's G20 presidency ends in November and that's it, that gives you a question of whether or not is there going to be longevity? Is this a realistic target that's been set? Where does this go exactly? There are many questions around, are these just talk shops or is there work being done? And I'd like to assure you that there's actual work being done. And that is the reason why this troika is operating in this way, right? It's to make sure that what happened before links to what's happening right now and will be connected to what will happen next year. Okay, so I want to explain the technical elements of the G20. So you have here the Sherpa track, that is the 15 working groups. And then you have the finance track, 7 technical working groups. All of these are very closed off. This is now simply the G20 presidency and the rest of the G20 countries. They deploy negotiators to work under these tracks. So when I say negotiators, what do I mean? I mean your diplomats, I mean policymakers, I mean technical researchers. For example, the IEJ as a resource partner would work under the theme Women's Empowerment, would also work under energy transitions, and would also work under food, technically under environment and climate sustainability, you see. So those are closed off negotiations. And all of these negotiations need to happen and be concluded on time for the summit of the head of the delegations. That will be taking place in November. So the G20 is actually something that's been happening, right? And where can you really get involved as a youth, as a member of civil society? To the engagement groups, of which there are 13, which is a staggering number if they're not 14 now, because there's an M20, which stands for the Media 20. I'll list some of the most prominent and probably most active. I'll start with the Y20, that is the Youth 20. It's the oldest engagement group of all of the engagement groups. The Y20 is actually almost like a mini G20 celebration. It operates very differently from the other engagement groups. So I, in my capacity as a supporting contact point for the local conference of youth South Africa, served in the technical task force for track 1 of the Y20, which is sustainability and energy transitions. What did that entail? That entailed preparing information or policy briefs for South Africa's Y20 delegate so that she could be prepared in negotiations. So if there was interest in food systems, we would go and research what is relevant for food systems in South Africa and what can be pushed in terms of new policy interventions, specifically for youth and specifically for South Africa, for your track 1 delegate to have been prepared in her negotiations with the rest of the Y20 delegates. So that was going on for a very long time, up until the actual date of this Y20 summit. It took place in June, and I had the pleasure of chairing the negotiations. So if you have any questions around what actually happened at the Y20 summit, happy to answer those questions as well. You have the Women 20, the W20, you have the Urban 20, and this is focused on cities and mayors. I would urge you to please focus on the Urban 20 communique, which came out last week, Sunday, because South Africa is going to have its local elections next year. This means you need to know what your cities, right? What did your cities and your mayors pledge? Because that is something you can hold them accountable to. And it's in the communique. There is a whole section for climate action and sustainability, and we're quite glad to see that there are very progressive policy interventions there. We actually drafted recommendations for the U20 under the banner A Just Transition in Local Governance and Exploration of the Urban. So really looking at urban climate resilience. If you live in Tshwane, you would have experienced the urban floods. You would have seen what happens in Centurion whenever it rains heavily. You would have experienced record-breaking heat temperatures in summer in Tshwane. Right? You would have seen the recent floods as well in Mthatha. Where can you find the Urban 20 communique link? I'll share it in the chat after my presentation. So please look at the communique so that you can see what happens and how you can look towards holding your own local municipalities accountable next year, because that is something that all of the mayors in South Africa, they agreed on. Right, the T20 is a think tank 20. And this is for your research institutions and for your think tanks. This is essentially research, right? That is the group of 20 for research. And then labor represents trade unions and workers. And a lot of you may only identify as youth, but you're already in the labor force, which makes you eligible to participate in the L20. Right? And you should be looking to see what are trade unions saying about workers? What are they championing for? What does this mean for green jobs? You know, we're here today, we're trying to discuss climate action and AI. So really, I would urge you to look into the L20, to look into the B20 if you have interest in corporate, or you want to understand what are the most important priorities of one of your most significant stakeholders in the policy landscape across the board. Are we talking climate action, or are we talking just economic policy? The B20 is a critical engagement group. So I'll try to give you an overview there of what is relevant for youth. And I would like to touch on the intersection of climate action and artificial intelligence. A lot of you may not know or may know that there are environmental and social costs for every sort of AI generated process. So whenever you search something into ChatGPT, there is an environmental cost. There is a glacier that's melting. There is air that's being polluted. There are people who are being grossly underpaid to make sure that those systems are running smoothly. And where are those people? They are in the continent of Africa. So they are in Kenya. They're being underpaid to run ChatGPT and other AI systems. So as much as we need AI for development, we also need to talk about the human and the environmental cost of AI. Right, a lot of companies and a lot of countries are now unable to meet their previous net zero by 2050 targets because of their commitment to AI. Google, for example, is one of the largest ones. It's simply not sustainable for them to run Gemini and to think that they might have a chance at net zero by 2050. And all of this has happened in a space of less than a year, right? Net zero by 2050 was very probable and realistic for a lot of companies last year. But because they prioritized AI and because there's a high cost of developing AI, that's not possible anymore. So we are always in this awkward space where we experience tension between economic development and sustainability. And that's where I hope that you would come in as people who signed up for this MOOC and people who are interested in multilateral processes, because we need to negotiate that balance very finely. Right? So in South Africa, there's a lot of talk about, is it a just transition if we simply close down the coal plants without ensuring that there are green jobs for people to transition out of the blue economy into the green economy, right? Is it? It's not. And again, it's that tension between economic development and sustainability, because South Africa is the biggest polluter, right, of carbon dioxide emissions on the continent of Africa. So closing down a coal plant is good, right, for the carbon dioxide emissions, but it's bad for the social and economic development, because unfortunately the coal plants are employing people. They're sustaining local communities. So it's that awkward tension about how do we achieve sustainable development while balancing both sustainability and economic development. And you really do so by thinking about ways to develop differently. And if you are on the IEJ's website, you'll see this. I'm afraid to change screens because I think it might give me technical issues again. But last week, actually not last week, 2 weeks ago, we launched a worker-centric approach, alternative financing for the Just Transition. So that is to say that the Just Transition implementation, or the investment plan, was looked at, and its mechanisms of financing were also assessed. I mean, right now, a lot of you should be aware that Donald Trump has significantly cut funding towards philanthropy, NGO sector, etc., etc. And that has implications for sustainable development and NGOs primarily, right? It has implications for climate diplomacy because the USA was part of the International Partners Group. So now we have a problem. Money was pledged, but money will not be received. So how else can we finance the Just Transition? And how can we do so? By placing workers first. And if you read our recent framework, a worker-centric framework for financing the Just Transition, that should provide you with some answers, because there are ways to change the budget. And here we're getting into the fiscal elements of it. All right, I hope I'm not losing you, because this is very much something related to economic policy. But it's about making changes to South Africa's current budget, because we can finance the Just Transition without international intervention. Now it's a question, because I mean, civil society and think tanks, and we've put out this alternative. It's a matter of how does government respond? Can government absorb these recommendations? Because to say there's no money is one thing, but if we prove that money can be drawn from different parts of the budget, then we are currently awaiting a response from the government. And I would finally encourage you to engage with that. I hope that I'm still on time, but in the case that I'm not, David, please let me know how many minutes I have left.
You have 9 minutes left.
Oh, okay. No, perfect. Right. Now I can get into practical elements. So I had touched briefly on how this could be, the G20 could be an opportunity for youth. And I mentioned these engagement groups in particular because I think that these engagement groups that youth could get themselves involved in. So yes, the U20 process has concluded and the Y20 process has concluded. The W20, the T20, the L20, and the B20, no, they are not finished, right? Especially the C20, which is the civil society 20. You also have the M20, the foundations 20, the F20. There are very many other engagement groups that still have their processes open for engagement. And so you can figure out ways. If you align, you need to think about your areas of interest. Are you interested in economic policy? Absolutely, I would say try to follow the B20 proceedings. There are things that are limited strictly to working group members, but there are also opportunities for the public to engage. So there will be webinars, for example. Old Mutual is a member of the B20 and they're running a public campaign. They are looking for your inputs and you're being encouraged. I think I'll send this link again after my presentation. They're looking for voices on the ground. So what do you think about sustainability and economic development? That's a very practical way for you to get involved. The T20 has opened a call for blogs. If you are interested in actually doing research and maybe you have an interest in food security or inclusive economic growth, you have alternative ways to think about it, or you want to see how do the AU policies measure against South Africa's policies, and how could this potentially help us solve the key challenge of food security in South Africa. And I mean, it's very terrifying to continuously hear how increasingly households are becoming food insecure. Then you have that opportunity to go to the T20 website or check out their LinkedIn page, see where you can submit your blog post, and really, in simple terms, shoot your shot. I really encourage a lot of youth to not think of the G20 engagement groups as spaces that they cannot engage in because the Youth 20 process is done. That's simply not fair, and it's not true. If you are a feminist and you are really interested in supporting the platforming of women and women's rights, please engage with the W20. They even have a creative partner, and that is their effort to engage Gen Z and even Gen Alpha in all of this. Of course, you have some of the world's leading feminist thinkers based in South Africa who are leading and chairing the W20, but you also have a lot of Gen Zs that have, thoughts, new ways of thinking around feminism, and we don't want to exclude youth in any of these processes. So there's an effort to have a creative partner in creative development. You can also check out creative development on Instagram. It's crtve.development. And they are trying to get different artists. So for example, Rouge, the rapper, to speak about matters relating to the W20, to make it more palatable for the general public. And if you follow the W20, you will see that campaign. I'm just trying to paint a picture here of how there are different ways for you to engage with these engagement groups and the G20 as a process. There's a lot of efforts to engage stakeholders in the general public because the Leader Summit is very much just a Leader Summit, but there's a lot of work that is going on from now up until November and even after November that you can really get involved in. Finally, I'll speak on the Social Summit, which is something that I think if you feel as though none of the 13 or 14 engagement groups speak to you directly, the Social Summit is where you will have a convening of all engagement groups and the official delegations from the G20 presidency. It's supposed to be a space where all stakeholders can engage. So not just civil society one side, and then the government delegations on the other side. The Social Summit is being convened by our former deputy president, and it's supposed to be in a very inclusive space. I would once again encourage you to try and see when are applications going to be opened for side events. Some of you are doing incredible work in your personal capacity and in your institutional capacity. Add to UNISA. Perhaps UNISA can apply to host a side event at the Social Summit. These are things that you can do, but you need to seek out the information because there is a lot that is being said and a lot that is happening. And it's critical for youth to take advantage of this opportunity. Participating in any of the G20 processes is going to be great for you and your career development. Simply before you even get into the benefits of doing the work, of following the negotiations, it's just the exposure to the environment that can really help you, especially if you're interested in international relations. Then you understand the importance, or rather the benefit of multilateral processes. Okay, I will send a lot of links in the chat now that I am done. And I would like to inform you that we've also released our National Youth Statement that is transition and local governance and exploration of the urban today. And so I'll send it in the chat so that you can see what our recommendations for the U20 were as we were official cycle partners of the U20. Thank you so much for your time. I did leave my email address in the chat. My name is Mudia Mafandiri, and I'm really glad to have engaged with you today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mafandiri, for your presentation. I do see a lot of applause as well. Thank you as well for dropping your email on the chat. Without any waste of time, let us jump over to the DS. This item will be handled by Mr. K. Gupta. And Mr. Gupta, I believe you are 11 p.m. already on that side?
10:30. Hi.
Yeah, great.
Hi, evening,
I can hear
everyone.
you. Hi.
Yeah, it's
Evening.
about 10:30 here.
Wow. Wow, thank you for making time to join us. When you're ready, please go ahead and walk us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our program director. And let me just first just say hello to all our colleagues here from UNISA and my team here in India. Thank you to both the speakers. I just thought that I learned so much from both the speakers, and we saw the amount of opportunities that are there for young people. And that's something that we've been talking about together in our workshops as well, that once you decide to have your voice heard and you start learning the right tools and the knowledge, opportunities are there for you to engage. So I think before we go to this summit itself, let me just quickly reflect on the workshops. I thought that again, like this year was tremendous. You see, I'm already smiling. We had such enriching discussions, very deep, quite reflective. Nobody was afraid to ask any questions, and as the world stands today, I think our workshops were also coinciding with some important world events. So even though the idea was to discuss climate change, I think we pretty much discussed every issue that we wanted to together. So let me just appreciate David, Nathma, Denzel, Richard, the whole team of ADO for this continued collaboration this year. Now we have 2 committees here this year, and I believe that there have already been interactions with the chairpersons, the judges, the executive board members, as we call them. So Let me just invite them once on the screen. If David just get our chairpersons to once on the screen. So we have two chairpersons, Prerna Diwan and Vaishnavi Singh, who are again university students um, and graduates from Delhi. So I mean I'm sure you'll get to meet with them. And I just want to also just touch upon another thing that you heard my colleague, like our previous speaker, touch upon G20. Let me also remind you that as we speak, the UN General Assembly is also in session. Currently, the 80th UNGA is already ongoing. So maybe your target could be next year's UNGA 81 in New York. Some of you. Uh, you already see pathways to engage with G20. I can tell you that there are similar pathways that exist for probably African Union's youth cohorts as well. Each organization right now, UN agency, has its own youth engagement space nowadays. So all you need to do is keep searching for opportunities yourselves, join communities, and B, again, if we have such fantastic platforms where we have a actual chair of one of the Y20 meetings join us. I think nothing can be better than that, and you are really the role model that we all aspire towards. So yeah, that's mostly my remarks. I want to keep it very short for all of you because I know you're all geared up for your conference. As you know that when we start our meetings tomorrow, your executive board members, your chairpersons, vice chairpersons, they will take over, and they will be guiding you through the entire process. And we are all very, very keen to hear what you have to say. We are especially looking forward to the outcomes that arise out of these meetings. And I believe that what I'm honestly shocked about is when David mentioned that we have had over 3,200 participants this year at the course. And what the part of it that makes me proud is that there are that many young people who care for the world, who care to make a difference in the world, and who have a belief that they can go out there and put the voice of South Africa and youth in the world when on critical issues like climate change or conflict. I've already every time talked about my own love for South Africa and the fact that South Africa has been a shining light when it comes to especially human rights, humanitarian, uh, humanitarian considerations for people, not through just their words or interventions at the UN, but even with the case at the ICJ. I think what the legacy that South Africa and South African leaders have carried on in this domain is really something that the next generation, that is your generation of leaders, there's big shoes to fill, but at the same time, there's so much to be done. And I think this just reminds me of something that Nelson Mandela said, and it stuck with me, that you have to do with the best with what you have. And I think this is where over the next 3 to 4 days, you will have your colleagues, you have artificial intelligence, Luwazi, you have your mentors. That's what you've got, and let's make the best out of it. I think and remember that even if two people from here end up becoming ministers, UN representatives, industry leaders, and those two people, you have created a friendship with them. Remember that you can still make your voice heard at a big level. So remember that this opportunity for Model UN is not just about debating, it is also about creating solidarity and networks with each other. for the future, because the friends I meet, I'm still collaborating with them at the civil society in governance and so on. So that's all. Let me wish you my very best, and I hand it over to our program director. Thank you.
All right, just before Tendo comes in, guys, thank you so much, Kashraf. Much appreciated. It was good hearing your voice again. I see my family even knows your voice now. They're all smiling. I just want to let the guys from the DS, you guys are actually in the presentation group, the presenters group now. So if you guys want, please do just switch on your camera and say hi to the audience. So we'll start with you, Parth, and then you can hand it over to the next colleague. Parth or Prina or Sakai. Yes, I have made you guys presenters. So if you want, you can just switch on your camera and say hi to the audience in South Africa.
David, it could also be some network challenges, perhaps.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right. Yes, I do see Teams as having gremlins again today. But yes, thanks anyway. We did manage to get them. But yes, we'll be meeting them again tomorrow, guys, and hopefully then again definitely on Thursday. So we'll make sure they're available. So back to you, Tendo.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you to each and every one of you who has made it thus far. Apologies, we are over a minute late, but we are going to our final item, and that is the closure. I will hand this item over to Natma Semi. So when you're ready, please go ahead and unmute your mic. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tendo. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for embarking on a journey through green technology, innovation, and climate resilience today. It was a theme that spoke not only to the urgency of our climate changes, but also to the boundless potential of human ingenuity and collaboration. From the welcoming remarks from our program director to the thought-provoking contributions of our student voices, from Mr. Gupta and his incredible team that have been facilitating numerous sessions over the last weeks aimed at capacitating students with skills that can take them forward in their journeys, in their climate change accountability ambitions as well. We also want to thank Ms. Chedi as well as Ms. Mafantiri, who really added their voices to our presentations today and showed us that there's numerous ways to engage with climate change and also numerous ways to add our own expertise to it. We've also seen how our youth voices, our policy expertise and technological innovation can converge and shape a more resilient and equitable future. So thank you so much to all of our presenters today and everyone that has made it possible. We've also been reminded that climate resilience is not just a technical goal, but it's also a deeply human goal, something that's rooted in justice, inclusion, and shared responsibility. So thank you again to all our speakers, our facilitators, and everybody working in the background. David, thank you as well. Thank you to Ms. Eloise Berger also for assisting us always, as well as Ms. Lindiwe Mahlango, Dr. Denzel Chetty, Mr. Richard Wright, and all our other technical assistants that we always rely on. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And again, to the students that are always joining us, this is about your future and you paving the way for yourself to have a better and more responsible climate. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Natma. This is the end of our trip. Please do enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.